Okay, so we're back here on, excuse me, the targeted practice. I scribbled in the answers that we had yesterday because I accidentally erased everything. But let's move on to number 2. So this says the minimum of the periodic function is -4, and it occurs when t equals 0. Maximum of the function is 6, and the period is 1. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick second, and I want you to write in your output values, just your output values. Do you agree with what I have so far? Right? Minimum, maximum. Those are easy, right? Then what is my midline values? 1. All right. And then what I would suggest that you do when you figure that out is to double check yourself that, all right, the distance between 6 and 1 is 5, and between 1 and -4 is 5. So once we figure that out, that is A. We're going to make that 5. Okay? And that way we have it there for later. Then it tells me that the period is 1. Okay? And it says that -4 occurs when t equals 0. Can I put 0 here? No, because then it's going to back up and be negative, right? So I would need to put 0 here. Then I need to figure out how to space out my input values. So if I look at this, I remember that we have 5 points that we have to fill in, but that breaks it down into 4 chunks. So I take whatever the period is, I'm going to multiply it by 1/4. So in this case, it makes it 1/4, right? So that means this is the distance between each x value. So I'm going to start here at 0. This one that I don't need, but I'll write it in so I don't get confused, is 1/4. This is 2/4. And then I just keep going. 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, and 6/4. And remember, we do not have to reduce, so we are not going to reduce. If this was FRQ4, that's a different story because it has a different set of directions. Any questions at this point? I have no idea why I wrote 2/3, and I have no idea what I actually said. So I don't know if I said 2/3 or 2/4, but what should it be? 2/4. Okay, again, no idea what actually came out of my mouth, but thank you for catching that. And if it was 2/4, why there was a 3, no idea. Probably because my brain was already over here, because that's sometimes my brain works faster than my mouth sometimes, and I can't slow it down. So then you can kind of double check yourself here. We know the period is 1. If we start here at 0, we can finish one cycle right here, and 4/4 is 1, so it makes sense. I also think it's probably not a bad idea that this, this number that we use to help us get our input values, if we mark it out after we use it, so we don't accidentally use it instead of the period when we need it, all right? Because sometimes, you get the little numbers, especially if they're fractions, you can get them all mixed up. Any questions about that so far? Does that seem fairly simple? Now remember, the words are what you would have determined from your from the problem situation, okay? And there was quite a bit of discussion. Well, actually, last period, but let's do number 3, and then I'll talk about what we discussed on number 3. So number 3, I'm just going to give you about 2 minutes to fill that stuff in based on everything that says there. Do the best you can. All right, so do we agree with my output values and my amplitude, right? Because, I mean, it pretty much told me, but it is what it is. Okay, so then it tells me that the period is 1/5, so I'm going to write that down. And the maximum occurs when t equals 0. So can I put 0 here? Yes, okay. And now, do I have to? No, I could put 1/5 there, but here I can. And so here's where the discussion was. Some people were confused on how do I know when I can use the 0 and when I can't? Well, basically, if the minimum or even the midline was at 0, those wouldn't make sense because that would make this negative. So I think the best way to kind of think about this is that if I bring this back here, there's 3 places a 0 is okay. Here, here, and here. Okay, those are okay to be zeros. Anything else not okay, that's why sometimes we have to back up and sometimes we have to draw other things. Okay, so that might help you kind of wrap your mind around that. All right, so then 0, like we said, 0 is okay right here. Right, and then because the period is 1/5, I could go ahead and also know that this is 1/5, but even if I don't, it's okay because we'd end up filling it in anyway. All right. So we take this 1/5. How many pieces are we breaking it into? 4. So I multiply by 1/4. So that gives me 1/20. So I start wherever my 0 is. This is 1/20. This is 2/20. This is 3/20. And that is 4/20, which is 1/5. So either way you have it written is totally fine. Okay? We all good with that? So do we feel comfortable filling in our x's and our y's if we have that information, right? That's two of our 6 points right there. Okay, the reason I have the paper copied like I do is not to save paper, but so that you had the other side, so you could see them and you weren't having to flip back and forth, basically. So what we're going to do next is we're going to use that information to come up with A, B, C, and D. And if you remember from the other day, I told you, start with D, do D, then A, because those are your vertical ones. They're going to be the easier ones, and together they give you 1 point. So when we look back at number 1 over here, your midline, which would be D, is your 18, right? And if we had checked that, I mean, I think we checked it, but we didn't necessarily write it down, or maybe we did, I don't know. But that gives you A being 3 and D being 18. Okay, you're pretty cool on that. Now, the equations could be sine or could be cosine. The only thing that's going to matter for is for C. A, B, and D, it doesn't really matter if it's sine or cosine because it doesn't change those. B is related to which part? The period. And the period for the first one was what? 1/6. Thank you. So I don't have to flip back and forth. So that means for B, because it can only be sine or cosine, definitely going to have 2 pi in the numerator, and I'm going to divide that by 1/6. And then we are going to do our elementary school math correctly and not mess up the fractions, and do 2 pi times 6/1, which is going to give us 12 pi. Okay, everybody good with that? All right, so then really I think the most confusing part, not that it necessarily is confusing, but I think if anything's going to be confusing, it would be the C for you. We looked at the fact that this one is sine. So when we go back over here, I know that sine has to start here on the midline. And so if this is 0, if I can go forward 1/24, I can go backward 1/24. And remember that the transformations work the same way that we've known forever. What's weird about trig is that they decided to change up the equation a little bit for you, but it doesn't change what the rules are. So if sine normally starts here at 0, but I'm now here at negative 1/24, that means I had to shift to the left, right? And we know that if we shift to the left, x is a liar, so we would get 2 plus 1/24, right? So that means once I write that down for myself, this is what I truly understand about x being a liar, and if I had to write the equation, there would be no confusion at all. but for whatever reason, they decided that should be plus instead of minus. So when I look at these two together, clearly I can see that C should be a positive 1 over 24. Okay. What questions do you have? Now, I want to point something out because I had a few questions about this too. There's an infinite amount of answers. Whoops, I went the wrong way. There's an infinite amount of answers. And I chose to take this and move to the left 1 over 24. We could have moved to the right 1 over 24, but then do you see how A would have been negative? And that's okay. As long as you make A negative, you can shift to the right. To me, that's making things a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, but it's not wrong. I also could have just moved to the right 3 over 24 and still had a positive A. That works as well, okay? So you do what makes sense to you, but I think I'm going to continue to show you by just doing it from the beginning here because I think overall that's what's going to make the most sense to everybody, okay? Questions? All right, so then I want you to work. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. I want you to look at number 2 and see if you can get your A, B, C, and D filled in over there. All right, do you agree with my A and D? Yes? We're all cool on that one, right? That's 1 point right there. It's a good point, easy point we can get. So then B has to do with my period. B is 2 pi divided by the period. Don't let something simple confuse you and then you start doing weird things, right? 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. Okay, sometimes when it's that easy, you I don't know, weird things happen. So this is 2 pi. Then we got to look at C, and I got to pay attention to the fact that it is cosine. So when I look at this, cosine I know starts up here. Parent function for cosine looks like this, right? Usually start here on the y-axis, but it starts here over to the right. And you leaving it as 2 over 4 is fine, but if you want to make that into 1/2 as you do it, that's fine too. I think, it just kind of depends on what the number is. If it's a weird fraction to reduce, don't risk doing it wrong. So I'm going to move to instead of at 0, I have to move to the right 1/2. That means that I would have t minus 1/2, right? And since this says plus c, my c value is what? Negative 1/2. Okay? What questions do you have? And remember, you can't do this if A is blank, right? You got to have something in there to try to get this part right here. Any questions at all? All right, work on the, yes, go ahead.
Is there any way possible that it doesn't say plus c?
No, it will totally say. Now, in every other function we have ever done, in any math class you have ever seen done, it says minus c, right? But it works the same way in the equation. Actually, my honest thought about this is that somebody is going to die on this hill. They're like, this is it. And then they put it in there in College Board and everybody's questioning why in the world we would do that. And I think they don't want to admit that they were wrong. Even though it's not wrong, it's just there's no reason to make it different. It just like makes it confusing. And the only reason it matters is when you pull the number out. If you're actually writing the equation, it doesn't matter because you're going to do the same thing you've always done. It's the way you pull the number out of the equation is what changes. So good question. But okay, work on number 3 if you haven't already. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So what I originally thought was this is already a cosine, it's just flipped.
Okay, that's totally fine. Yes, absolutely. Okay. So it's already a cosine. If we're doing this, it's just flipped. So then that means, so then what was your C? What would your C be? It'd be 0 because we're not moving. Okay. Then your B is normal, but what else would have to change? The sign of A, right? So if you make A negative, that would be fine. And then your C value would just be 0. And that totally works. Okay. Good question. It's a good question. Nobody actually writes them like that, right? Oh, maybe. Okay. So what about, we think 7 and 12? Yes, we're good with those. Super easy, but you can't do it if A is blank, right? And notice how we already had 7 written there because we were figuring out the amplitude anyway. All right, so then B, what was the period here? 1/5? Okay, 1/5. So that means B is going to be 2 pi divided by 1/5, which gives us, well, that's a weird 5, but 10 pi. Very good. Then this one is sine, right? So I'm going to come back over here, and I do have multiple options, but again, I'm just going to kind of go with the simplest option, thinking we're going to start at, one of these 2 places. I'm going to start here for sine, and that is at 0. Well, I need to figure out what this point, if I can go forward 1/20, I can go backward negative 1/20, right? So that means instead of sine starting at 0, we move to the left 1/20. So then we know that when we do that, that would be t plus 1/20, right? And then when I look at this, that's plus. That means that's going to be a positive 1/20. Everybody good so far? Questions about that? Do you have a question? It's fine. Why was C negative on 2? Because we normally start here and we moved to the right. So since we moved to the right, that makes it t minus 1/2. And since we moved to the left here, that's what makes it t plus 1/20. Does that help? Okay, good question. What else we got? Anything? All right, great. Grab your other piece of pink paper. And we're going to start by looking at the airplane. Because we figured out, we're pretty confident in how to plug in those numbers, right? But that was when we were given what to do. We have to be able to read through the problem situation and pull that stuff out. One of the things that is not as always so obvious is the period, okay? I think that you could probably pull the rest of this out, but I want to talk about the period on this before I turn you loose on anything else. So let's just talk through this a little bit. The figure shows an airplane propeller rotating in a circular clockwise direction that completes 50 rotations every second, okay? So before I worry about anything else, I got 50 rotations per second. And I have to change that concept into the period. So one thing I think that kind of helps me make sure I don't get things backwards and don't overthink it is I think, all right, so I know one rotation, and I haven't even read to see if it's sine or cosine yet, and it doesn't matter because I'm not trying to make a pretty graph. I just know that if I do this, this is like, I got like 50 cycles, right? And it doesn't even have to be 50. I'm just going to scribble like, boom, I got 50 cycles, right? And that 50 cycles are going to happen in 1 second. Well, I need just 1 cycle. So 1 cycle would stop like right here, and that would be 1 out of how many? 50. And that's 1 second, so that's 1/50th of a second for one of them. Do you with me on that? And you see how just a little scribble could be very helpful. Maybe you don't need the scribble because you can reason through it. But for me anyway, seeing things visually can kind of make it make sense. So there's the period, right? It goes on to say point B is at the end of one of the propellers. Now remember, yes, I'm pretty sure you can mark on this with the tools that are in there, but it's not a bad idea for us to draw out something for ourselves anyway. So let's do that. And point B is right here. And let's see, point B is at the end of one of the propellers. Point X does not move because that's where it's, that's where it hangs on. As the propeller rotates at a constant speed, the height of B above X periodically increases and decreases. So and it shows you this is 30, this is negative 30. So they were even nice about that. So this would be a positive 30. This would be a negative 30 because it's how far above X it is, and here it's below X. At time t equals 0 seconds, B is at its lowest position. Well, this would be its lowest position, right? So that would be 0, negative 30. At its highest position, it's 30 feet directly above, but we don't know a time for that, and that's okay. The sinusoidal function h, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so take that information that we came up with. First, let's just get our y values on here. And you can write on this stuff, but I put what you would see in your answer booklet over to the right. I'm going to write on mine just so I don't have to flip back and forth, and you can write on it too, but pretend like you're filling it on your answer booklet as well. So let's get in just our output values first. Do you agree with mine so far? What's my midline number? 0, because it's halfway. There's nothing wrong with 0, and sometimes when 0 is what our answer is to stuff, it throws us off a little bit for whatever reason. So that's what we've got here. We've got that the period is 1/50, and it also says that at time t equals 0 seconds, B is at its lowest point. Can I put 0 here? No. I have to back up and put it here. Okay? Because remember, it's here, here, and here. Those are our 3 choices of where to put that. So now that I have that, and I have the period, how many chunks am I breaking this up into? 4, and it's 4 every single time. Everything else can change. It's always going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's always 4. There's 5 points. Yes, but it's always 4. Okay, so that 1/4, that's going to be, I don't care what else is going on. You take whatever the period is, and we're going to multiply it by 1/4. Okay, so you don't have to recount, but if you forget or whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be the same every time. Even if we write extra stuff, this is still just 1 period right there. So that gives me 1/200. Okay, we good with that? So if this is 0, go fill in your x values or your input values. See if I can do it correctly this time. Now, we had to put this one on here because we needed to put a 0. Nobody's asking us for this, and really nobody's asking us for this, but I'm going to fill it in. I can't just act like it's not there and start with 1 here, right? So you want to fill them in just so you have everything. Even if you write this on your actual answer thing over there, they're only looking at the ones they need to be looking at. So you having extra stuff on there is totally fine, all right? They are looking in those parentheses that are already there at those points. So the extra stuff, they kind of expect it to be there. All right, any questions at this point? We good? All right, now use that information and you come up with A, B, C, and D. Yep. So we'll talk about, I guess, what you would say, like my way first, and then we'll talk about that one too, but that totally works. He wants to be fancy. It's fine. It makes sense to him. Okay? Well, we'll talk about what he did. Okay? But I don't know that it'll all, I don't know. I feel like if I just kind of showed you that way every time, I think for some people it would make things more confusing. But if it makes sense to you, there's lots of options there. And it's good that it makes sense to you. All right. So what is D? 0. Okay? That is a possible answer because right here, this would be y equals 0. There's absolutely nothing wrong with 0. Okay? A is what? 30. Okay? At least to begin with, right? And then B comes from the period, so B would be 2 pi divided by 1 over 50. What's that going to be? 100 pi. Okay, so right now, those 3 things that I just figured out, doesn't matter if it's sine or cosine. Then I need to look at what it is. It is cosine, okay? If I want to keep a positive, which I don't have to, but again, I think for some people that might be the best option, we know that cosine would start right here. This is not 0. It's a positive 2 over 200, which reduces to 1 over 100, but we don't have to do that, especially if it's like a weirder fraction. I can leave it 2 over 200. I move to the right 2 over 200, so that means it would be t minus 2 over 200, right? Which means that C is negative 2 over 200 or 1 over 100, whatever. I'm just going to show you. You can leave it like that and it's fine. So we were all very curious as to what Angel did, right? So I'm going to write his, I guess, in a different color. I'll do like the light pink. Okay, so D is the same. I'm guessing he probably started out with a positive 30 right there. Is that right? Okay. And then B is still 100 pi. Yep. All right, so what he saw, since it is cosine, he sees it as an upside down cosine right here, which again is fine. That would mean that I didn't move left or right any, so he could have a 0 right here, but then the A would have to change to a negative 30. Okay? And that is totally fine. And if that makes more sense to you, absolutely nothing wrong with it. Okay? We okay with all that? All right, any questions? All right, now remember that the B part, let's say A and B is just a complete disaster. Sometimes you don't even know if you're right or wrong, right? But sometimes you get so confused and you're like, I don't even know, it's stressing me out. You don't have to, whether you do A and B or not, it doesn't even matter. You can do C and D without any of that done. You can do that first if you don't want to be stressed out when you do it, whatever. So when we look at C, the only difference would possibly be which letters they're using. And I can't even read what that one is. What's that one? I just marked over it. It says J. Okay, it's just weird. J. G and J. I guess that would make sense. So it's this part right here. Is the function just the function? I don't have a fun chart because nobody's asking me about rate of change. Function increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. Okay, so I'm going to eliminate those. Is the function positive or negative? Negative. Now, I know it starts at 0, and 0 is not positive or negative, but look, it's not included. So that's what makes it, it's just negative. So we're here at D. Now, on our answer document, do we write all that stuff out? No, we write D and we move on. You don't even have to put the little thing. You just have to put D. Just make sure that there's no question that the letter you wrote is D, okay? Just meaning some of your handwriting is a little wild. So I don't know that anybody has A, B, C, and D. Would be hard to recognize. Just throw that out there, okay? Oh.